the power of digital identity and what it means.
This is like totally going to change the game, and most people don't realize it. What's up, boys and girls? Welcome to Digital Creator University, Episode 1, the podcast that you tune in to understand all the tips and tricks and hacks and tools of becoming a successful digital influencer. For our very first episode, we have got for you Mr. Daniel Monge. Daniel has built a lot in his life so far. He has co-founded Hip Hop Charts Australia, Rolling Up Entertainment Podcast, to most recently starting NFT Melbourne. He also serves as Chief Experience Officer of Pixel Boss. He joins us on the debut podcast of the Digital Creator University. So enjoy. All right, Daniel, welcome to the show. Sorry we wake you up at 8 in the morning, man.
Pleasure. Now I'll jump back in. Pleasure to meet you. Tuning in from Melbourne, Australia. It's one of the, anytime anyone jumps on a podcast and starts a podcast venture, I'm always willing to help out and jump in. It's always fun.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing this, man. Like your debut podcast, so I'm really pumped up for this. And
pleasure, man. Tell me, like, are you planning any other guests on the way? Any particular?
We have a bunch of guests lined up after that. So the focus of this podcast is only going to be like on the digital creator space. But first of all, what I want you to do is show the audience your lovely T-shirt, because I think your T-shirt speaks volumes. We got Solana T-shirt.
Yeah, that will. I mean, now my goal is to wear only Web3 merch. I've realized this year after getting gifted and making a few T-shirts. It's like, all right, how do I shift my whole wardrobe to be only Web3 related merchandise? And that's my goal for the end of the next year.
Yeah, I've got an idea. Like I'm wearing these black T-shirts. I just need stickers from like all the Web3 crew.
Pretty much.
It's like the Black Panther, and this old dress. I could have something on the around, just like that. All right, so let's jump straight into it, right? Hey, give us a brief history about yourself, like a brief background before you jumped into the world of NFTs, like what you did and how you got into this world.
Yeah, before the world of Web3, I was deep into the music industry, right? I had started a podcast 3 years ago called Rolling Up Entertainment, with the subliminal messaging of essentially everything goes up in life, everything goes down, but at the end you roll up and you try and make it worth it, try and end it on a high. And within that, I started interviewing rappers, DJs, producers, everyone within the Australian hip hop music scene. And I discovered a love for providing a platform for these creatives to share their story. And then a year into that, I got reached out by a music label, and they were like, all right, we want to start this platform called Hip Hop Charts AU. I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's make it happen. So I joined forces with Modern Day Entertainment. And at the time, I didn't realize, but we ended up creating Australia's first hip hop charts aggregator. I didn't know it was called an aggregator at the time, and only now, until retrospect and looking back on Web3. However, that was able to provide real data, real time of artists in terms of where they were objectively, removing bias, and that's what it was. And then a year after that, discovered Gary Vee, and along the journey, we ended up running events. Did the first NBL, which is like our version of the NBA. Halftime show, brought on music artists, and just fell in love with like running that event, and met Gary Vee in person and fired me up to another level of momentum to start more things and learn more in 2019. And when Gary Vee started talking about NFTs, that was my like green signal to go all in, right? He's like, look, just go study it. And I was all right, it's Gary Vee, let's go make it happen. Minted VeeFriend, and then pretty much since then have been all in. It's like, all right, how do I shift everything into this space? The podcast, the platform, events, and that's when we started running events, and I'm happy to get into that. But that's pretty much how it started. Gary Vee talking about NFTs, and I think he's onboarded more than almost anybody, probably outside of this new Reddit onboarding that they've done.
I mean, yeah, Gary Vee is like, he's such a great mascot for the whole space, I feel.
Mm.
It's like every time I hear that person, he's just always so positive, and he's just
He's
like
on
a
board.
great,
He's onboarded so many different
yeah.
types of people that were so unconscious of the space,
Mm.
myself included, because he has so many different niches and areas of his content. Like, yes, it's self-development focused, but he's got his wine community and music community, arts, sports, and when you have all those networks, one, it helps with building an NFT project because everyone jumps on board for your own. However, it ends up onboarding so many more people.
I mean, that's the whole beauty, right? Like people who are so influential on these different spaces, they're trying to come into NFTs, and this is one of the themes that I think we should be exploring, because I feel like in the next 4 to 5 years, NFTs will be in the toolkit of every person who's a digital creator or who's like an online influencer. This is like totally going to change the game, and most people don't realize it.
That's what I realized. That was the
All right.
view of how I realized it. I
Yeah.
was like, all right, it made sense immediately, which is okay, artists get to own their work in perpetuity for the rest of their life.
Yes.
And their families get to live that essentially generational wealth,
Yeah.
and it shows it on an immutable platform. This makes sense. You don't need to understand blockchain. You need to understand that you own your work, and it beyond a JPEG and a screenshot. You can screenshot a Lamborghini or someone else's house, or go in front of it and take a picture in front of it, but it doesn't make it yours. But
Yeah.
now this is a way to give back to the creatives, the creators, for the first time in history.
Yeah. I mean, that too in such a digital way. And I mean, I'd really, I sometimes I laugh when people say you could just right click and save. And I'm like, man, like
Hmm.
you could right click and save, but like the thing that you've saved, when you go out and sell it and somebody else sells it after that, like, you're not getting the royalties. And nobody's going to be buying that stuff because it's counterfeit, because the whole idea is that, where this thing comes from. And that's your wallet is not the same wallet. And B, you're not the person who has the community. You can fork, say, a project, you cannot fork a community. So I just quite laugh at these people, like, it's just like a little bit of research required, just like you said, like, you don't need to understand blockchain. If you understand that key concept, I think you're good to go.
Agreed. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. I'm on the same boat as you. I'm at the stage of not. I don't force anybody to join a community or convince anybody.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where it's like, this is going to happen. It's going to happen anyways.
Yes.
So either come and explore, or
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah. Hey man, come and explore or be left behind. That's all your wish.
Yeah, pretty much.
I
That's the
mean,
stage we're at.
I also think, like, we have also come to a place where point last year where we had all these market surpluses. Like somebody
Hmm.
came up with the idea of like 10,000 profile pictures, and then everybody copied to the point where it's like every Tom, Dick, and Harry is shilling their own, like, PFPs. And the funny thing is, like, most of them
Yeah.
don't have an understanding of how they're going to create and sustain a digital community.
Well, a lot of them got up to the point where they ran out of money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Even like, let's talk about good projects that have
Yeah.
gone down bad.
Yeah.
Like, forget about even the bad ones.
Yeah.
Let's look at, okay, all these good projects that have simply exhausted their resources because
Yeah.
they never transferred ETH to USDC, or they never had some other
Yes.
level of cash flow.
Yeah.
That's the problem with a lot of these projects, is that they've lost cash flow, or they've never developed a sustainable model for business that
Exactly.
provides ongoing revenue from other streams outside of royalties, which now everyone's giving up.
Yeah.
And there's a conversation around that. They'll still exist. And like, outside of merch and these small badges and stickers, you got to provide something else. There has to be a way to earn an income, because it's a business, right?
Exactly. So
And
it's
then
like,
all the ones that don't provide any value, they're gonna zero out.
exactly. So it's like Gary Vee with VeeFriends. He says that I want to make it like, the next generation's Marvel or Disney characters. That's what I want to make it. And that's where you see a vision. That's where you see an understanding of, okay, how I can take these characters and how I can build a business around them.
Mm.
Like most of the projects, you don't have, most of the projects did not have any roadmap to how they're going to create and sustain a digital community or create a business. And B, even those that did, and they ran out of money now because the market's tanked, because everybody thought Bitcoin was going to 100,000, and lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah.
So
And his approach was very different, right? And it continues
yes,
to be, because particularly around the IP and his characters, he has the vision. He knows
yeah,
what story he wants to tell. And he made a very good point, which was like the whole idea when Moonbirds and the CCO and Bored Ape Yacht Club and their IP and how it all works versus his. And the difference between buying his NFTs, you don't get his IP, you don't get rights to that animal, that character, that piece of art, which a lot of other projects are giving that IP, and it gets very complicated, particularly within each country, right? However, the beauty around his is he knows the vision. And for instance, with Bored Ape Yacht Club, anyone can create anything, right? You can create a burger store, which we've seen in restaurants.
yeah,
However, you can also create like go into bad industries or ways you
yeah,
don't want to represent your brand. Maybe it's the adult sex entertainment industry and you want to utilize your Bored Ape, you can, because you
yes,
own that IP. And I think what Gary was building is he didn't want anybody to build his brand because he knows how his characters want to play out and what he wants them to emulate. And if he's painting a vision for it and then somebody else is also painting a vision for it, it's going to confuse the audience and the brand, and particularly the long-term brand, which he's trying to sustain. When we look at like Toys R Us and utilizing plush toys, he's clearly trying to tap into the next generation, right? And you can't do that if somebody owns your IP.
exactly. I think that's a very valid point, and I hadn't thought of this before. Like you could take it and you could use it in n number of ways, and a lot of them could be bad, that you don't want your brand
Yeah,
to be represented there. Yeah, it's a
yeah, it's
valid
not
point.
necessarily bad, but like one mistake and it all goes down, right? Like,
Yeah,
let's say a Bored and Hungry was to fail, like it does really
yeah,
well now, but let's say the CEO rugs with all the money, people then associate Bored Ape Yacht Club with the rug, not
yes,
that individual Bored Ape and that person and business entity that's
yeah,
utilizing it. So then it has essentially a bad brand image. Not saying Bored and Hungry isn't there phenomenal, but
yeah,
just as an example. And you duplicate that with 10,000 people trying to start businesses and IP, it can get very muddy, but at the same time, it can become like a Pokemon where it's world recognizable and everyone
yeah.
recognizes it. And there's fakes and there's people starting brands on it becomes a globally recognized brand.
Yeah, I mean, when I said bad, I meant like it could become bad for the brand in the future, just
Mm.
like you were saying. I think that's the interesting thing that I found about VeeFriends. Like that's Gary V's version of, I guess, creating these characters like the next Pokemon or Flintstones or whatever have you, because the characters are quite different to each other. So it's like I'm not sure if the base character is the same in all of the VeeFriends. Is it like you're a holder?
Nah, they're different. So there's different
Exactly,
artworks and there's different
exactly,
characters that represent a different emotion, which is extremely powerful in itself.
exactly. So like a Pikachu could, or like a evolved version of Pikachu, I forget the name. Those two might have the same base character, but a Pikachu or Charizard would not have the same base characters. You can tell I have
Mm,
extensive knowledge of Pokemon. I mean, I've seen the show when I was growing up, so
yeah.
and that's one of the things I really find interesting about VeeFriends. That's one of the things I found super interesting.
I mean, that one thing that
Yeah,
I've found incredibly powerful is the ability to connect it to an emotion
yeah,
or a value, which is like anytime we think about empathy, we're going to think about an elephant. Anytime we think about patience, we're going to think about a panda.
yeah,
How wild is that in future? That's very easy in marketing when everyone is associated in one word. When we think of Apple, we don't think
yeah,
of like the first brand when you think of Apple, and everyone absolutely everybody knows. And that's going to be the same thing with all these emotions,
yeah,
gratitude and gorilla. Like, how do I know that? Like, that's just been embedded through content, and he's going to do the same. He's doing the
yeah,
same.
yeah. I mean, I think like this is somewhat repackaged version of like what we've seen growing up in some of the shows. For example, do you know the Jungle Book? And you have all these different characters, and they have all
Yeah,
these different qualities, right? And so if you immediately think of one character, you think about their qualities. And it's just taking the other, like it's just taking it from the other way around. So if you think about emotion, you're going to think of character. But if you think about that character, you're going to think of the emotion that they represent. So I find it really interesting, and I find it very interesting that a guy who understands character building and all this stuff is entering into the NFT space with such an open mind. And that should be a cue for all the digital creators to look at the NFT space as how they can use that and how that could be a potential tool in their toolkit. But yeah,
Well,
let's talk.
it's always
Sorry.
been about storytelling, right? It's always been
Yes.
about storytelling.
Yes.
That's what it has always been that. Like, that's what brand has always been.
Yeah.
And he's just leveraging his skills, and anybody in the space, that's how they're gonna win,
Yeah.
which is telling a powerful, authentic story. And now for the first time in history, you have a network and a community that can be a part of that story.
Wow. Yeah.
And they have the option to dictate. They don't have to dictate, but they have the option to.
Super
So you could
important, man.
sell out a film without even making the film. You can
Yeah.
sell out a book without even writing the book. You could do that through GoFundMe's and Kickstarters, but now you can build it openly in public.
Yeah.
I find that wild.
It's quite fascinating. And then, you could easily distribute the royalties and all. So like you
Yeah,
could have
yeah.
all, yeah, I mean that you have all these different kind of things you can do around NFTs. And this is one thing that if anybody listening should take away from this podcast, that it does not only have to be like a 10,000 profile pictures, although that's a good concept, but people should go out and think more about what different concepts can they bring to the NFT space. For example, VeeFriends like has different characters, different base characters. So you understand that there's like a well thought out plan.
I think it's a tech that's going to be utilized with the smart contracts behind. That's going to be really powerful.
Yeah.
Like, the more and more I connect with these artists, builders, founders, collectors, degens, and developers through the events that we do, the more I realize that these smart contracts and the way they're going to be utilized and the gamification of them is where it's going to you're going to get different types of rewards. And then you you gamify that and say, all right, anybody that liked or attended 9 of my events out of the 9 that I hosted gets a free airdrop. If you entered 5, then you get a mug of a tea with the branding of our stuff. If you attended 1, then you get, there's so many ways to go about it, and that's a very simplistic way of describing it.
Yeah, and like that's exactly like I'm trying to build with the other project that I have. So it's like people could build digital communities, and everybody's got different collection which has a different smart contract attached to every collection. So it just makes things really easy for people how to incorporate that. But people have to go and think about like what you're talking about, like different concepts of how they can use NFTs. But hey, let's jump gears a bit. Like let's talk about like NFT MELB. I'm thinking it's a short form for Melbourne, I suppose. Right,
Yeah,
short form.
NFT MELB, like I guess going back to the origin story of that.
Yeah.
That started through one. It was 6 months beforehand of really solid degen hours, which were just diving into my laptop, being on like 2 or 3 jobs, and just being on calls and literally minting NFTs while I'm on like a sales call. And I was going ongoingly to this meetup called Feel Good Dips, which was like cold water therapy, Sunday morning, beach, 7:30 a.m. In Melbourne's winter. And it would be very good for the body. The people that you'd meet there were phenomenal. Business owners, entrepreneurs, just people getting uncomfortable in life in some fashion, right? And I was talking about what I was doing, which was NFTs, and then there were a few other people that were in the mix of crypto and so forth. And then it got to the point where a lot of people were asking me questions, and I was like, oh, I know a little bit. And I searched, I was like, what events are there? And like, who's doing NFT events? I want to go to one. This would be sick to connect with more people. And I didn't find anything. So I was like, well, if it's not there, just build it. without the concept of doing it with thousands of people or building a large brand or anything like that. I was like, let's just throw an event. So put it up on Eventbrite, Facebook. 8 people showed up, and that was the catalyst for starting NFT MELB. But that was the validation that there's people in the space that want to attend an event, and that compounded every fortnight. So I threw an event every fortnight since November last year, or every 2 to 3 weeks, and that compounded into 8 people, turned into 10 to 12, 12 into 20, 24, 30, 50, 60. Before we knew, we were at like 200 plus, running a bunch of different events with different themes, whether it's mental health focus or theme trucked around food trucks, whether it was a panel on professional people within the Web3 space or an art gallery focused event. Just absolutely like just throwing things at the wall that I never seen being done before here, because no one was doing them, and just testing like who was coming. Well, what would happen if we made it more degen focused? What would happen if we had a panel? Could we do a panel? Yeah, hell yeah. Can we record it? Yeah, we can record it. Can we gamify it? Can we create tags for people to recognize each other? All right, who are the 4 groups that are coming? So, well, the main 4 groups are like artists, builders, founders, collectors, degens, and then developers. Those are the 4 segments of people that are coming to these events. How can we cater these events purely around them? And that's what it was from the jump, which is all community led. And then that ended up leading us into traveling to Sydney. And then we ended up creating NFT Sydney probably 4, 5, 6 months ago. Now that's up, that's running. That's a monster on its own. John from NFT Sydney is running that up with the Not Essential and Degen Aussie Apes from Australia. And then again, the same thing happened. New Zealand called, and the community was like, all right, we want to do an event out there. So we're like, all right, well, geez, NFT New Zealand it is, I guess. Yeah. We flew over to New Zealand. That was a team of 5 founders that started that. And the feedback from that was incredible, right? Yeah, and NFT New Zealand, that started off with 100 people. And when you look at that, you're like, all right, if NFT MELB started off with 8 people and we're starting this community off with 100, what's it gonna look like in a year from now? And it's a bear market as well. So the quality of people that are coming to these events are 80% builders and founders. They're building something, they're part of a project, they're a community manager, they're a head of marketing. They're just pretty much all in, or they're full-time into Web3, and they want to do this for the rest of their life or the next few years ahead, that's for sure. And then after that New Zealand event, pretty much Gold Coast happened as well, around the same time, which was, we went to Gold Coast. We were in an activation there with Sydney and Melbourne, did a cross collaboration with Flow, so the platform that NBA Top Shot built on, the Flow ecosystem. So collaborated with Flow to do their NFT day, and we realized, oh wow, there's a community in Gold Coast. So we planted the seed for NFT Gold Coast. So Renee up there is going to run that up. And now it's like, all right, that's going to be launching in probably like a week from now. Yeah, now it's gotten to the point where the entire East Coast of Australia is lined up with our events, and we've realized, all right, how do we centralize this? How do we keep everybody collaborating together? And right now, Discord's that platform. So we created an NFT pack and pretty much started that brand as of within the last 12 hours. We launched NFT APAC, and now that's live. So doing events across Asia and the Pacific region of Australia primarily, but now extending to Asia and running these events. And the beauty of going wide is that we know the depth of our audience and we know what they want. However, being able to test that continuously in each city and reaffirming that people want to be part of it a cultural movement is the most important part, because we're able to really validate our ideas from the events and what people want. Because what we've seen with the event landscape, in terms of just a macro perspective of Web3, is, let's look at NFT London, which we talked about before we jumped on.
Yep.
Yeah, the NFT, I mean, yeah, the macro perspective of these events and NFT London, for instance, before we jumped on, you look at these events and they can be driven in two ways, which is content driven and contextually driven, or they can be driven from an exhibitor, almost like sponsorship level. Yeah. So on the macro perspective of events, the way I see it, and NFT London is a pure use case of perhaps how it went run. And I'm not saying this was the reason, but it could have been the reason, which is the events are run in two different ways: content and contextually driven, which is more so by the people, and then sponsorship, exhibitor driven, which is more so driven by the organizers with an intention behind. And the two differences are quite clear. One is usually more, how do we monetize them straight away and create sales and create like onboard them into our community. And the other one is, how do we give value? And it's a two-channel communication, right? This is what we're looking for. What would you like? This is our value. What do you bring to the table? Whereas this is just like one-dimensional, throw it in your face. And that's probably where a lot of these events are going wrong, right? They're not listening to the community. They're more trying to drive everybody. They're trying to drive a bus, but it's with empty people, because the tickets that are being sold are probably too high, and they haven't told anybody where they're going on the bus. They're like, no, just come on the journey. They're like, just trust us. It's like, oh, but where are we going? We want to choose where the destination is. We want to choose where we're going.
Yeah.
And the events are like, nah. But however, the way I see them being culturally driven, which is being in constant communication, participating in these communities as much as you can, through Twitter, Discords, and the necessary platforms, you understand what people want, and you can test it and you can validate that. You can say, all right, do you want the ticket to be for free, or do you want the ticket to be like, where do you want to go first on this bus trip? Who do you want to go on this bus trip with? Do you want to eat something on the bus trip? Do you want to experience something on the bus trip? And obviously the bus trip is the NFT and Web3 events. And then that's where we're continuing to move, which is particularly, I think we're going to see a lot more sensory and experiential plays with these events. That's my big take, which is everyone's gotten kind of bored of the conference style panel talks, and people want to experience something, particularly in this bear market when there's not a lot of money moving, right? Like there's money in the space, it's just not moving.
Yeah, I think what you just described here is like they're using Web 1.0 for conferences to try to arrange conferences for people who are in Web 3.0. So it's like it's the whole culture, the whole movement around blockchain and NFTs is about decentralization, giving power to the people. And people don't enjoy here that if you just shove stuff in their face, and people want to be heard, they want to have decentralized autonomous organization. Basically they want the rights, like they want to have their say. They want to have something that they can take away with. And basically what you just described is like there are two ways to conduct conferences. One is basically the centralized way of doing it, and the other is decentralized way of doing it, which I think makes a lot of sense. And like if there is any NFT conference builder or anybody who's thinking of conducting events, that's like really really of value to that person to understand like the industry we operate in. So that's just how I took this. Like I just saw it like two ways. It's like centralized conferences versus decentralized conferences. How do you
I think you can do a hybrid version of them too.
Yeah.
Those centralized conferences will still fill in seats. You got to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because corporate bodies are still getting into the space. Web2 brands are still getting into the space that know nothing. So they'll pay $10,000 for a ticket. It's just what that conference actually does for them. They'll still get takeaway value. However, being embedded with the whole macro, it's just a different audience the way I see it.
Don't you think like the way I hear you, don't you think it's the style of conferences is going to change? It's like we've had those kind of conferences since the advent of conferences, probably, right? And so people are coming in this space, new people are coming in this space expecting the same thing. But then you have the community who's like the collector, the holders who enjoy this space, and they want things
Well, I
done
think let's look at
differently.
it. Let's look at it bigger. Like
Yeah.
conferences are going to change, but
Yeah.
everything's going to change.
Yes.
Like the way you build a restaurant is going to change. The way you launch a book, the way you create podcasts is going to change. Everything's going to change because of
Yes.
this. Because the first time in history, you have to actually provide value because there's such a massive supply of creatives and digital
Yeah.
creatives, and every second kid in the Western world wants to become a YouTuber.
Yes.
If everyone's doing that, how do you stand out? And we've seen the people that have stood out have been the individuals that have been able to understand the creator economy to and contextualize it to each platform and create content for those said platforms. So right now, the ones with super underpriced attention are really activating. Your TikToks, like Mr. Beast on YouTube is absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
He's building $1 billion brand, and the way you build any business is going to change.
Yes.
Obviously, the traditional businesses, brick and mortars, are going to continue to run. However, even them,
I think they're gonna like experience a lot of distribution. Sorry, a lot of disruption. The brick and mortar stores are gonna, in my prediction, they're gonna experience super high levels of disruption. Because think about it, there is a cola brand that you associate with, but they don't have the distribution, and now the content creators are the ones who have the distribution because the distribution is open. So if a few content creators drop an NFT, right, and they come together and they create this cola brand, and they have all these followers who start drinking the cola. Either the cola brand, the conventional cola brand, needs to collaborate with these guys, or there's going to be friction. Like this is going to happen. Have you seen like Kim Kardashian partnered with like one of the guys from Carlyle Group, and they found this PE firm called Sky Ventures.
not familiar.
So basically, what a PE firm does is like they buy a business that's not running well, and they restructure the business, and then they run it well, and then they take it public again. Basically, sort of what Elon is doing with Twitter right now, right? And since Kim Kardashian has this huge distribution, think about this: like Kim Kardashian is basically, she's not like your A-list Hollywood actress or something, but her and her family have always had that kind of distribution, from reality TV to now so many fans on Instagram, so many followers on Instagram. And basically, she has this distribution. She just needs to put like 2 Instagram posts, and the brand becomes famous. So all these brick and mortar brands are going to experience a huge amount of disruption. That's what I feel.
Well, it's going to be the third wave
Yeah.
because we've seen the brick and mortars that weren't able to convert to social media.
Yeah.
They fell down and or are falling down. And the same thing's going to happen to Web3, which is if you don't get involved, this is my prediction, you're going to get left behind again.
Exactly.
And it's that whole movement of either you can watch from the sidelines and have your ego tripped out by not joining because you don't understand or you're not willing to learn, or you can educate yourself and be willing to learn like everybody else is right now, because no one knows what they're actually doing. They're just figuring it out along the way.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think people have to understand how this helps in like even more monetization of any content that they create, or anything that they create, even if it's a physical good that could have an NFT, and that could have a lot of value. And people need to wrap their heads around this concept. Otherwise, they're going to lose out in the race.
I'm looking forward to when we can use NFTs and it'll be utilized on every single application phone. We don't even know when we're using it. Like, that's what it's going to turn into, right? When you're buying apps from the App Store, and that's an NFT in itself, or you're purchasing food, but also how we showcase these NFTs will be, I think, the most important. What that looks like the idea that Did I cut out?
No, you're fine. Go ahead. Keep going.
Like
I like this
the
thought.
idea the idea that as a 12-year-old, like 10 years ago, would try and flex a physical good versus
Yeah.
a 12-year-old now and in the future is going to flex a digital good
Yeah.
is wild to me. Like they're going to be flexing what profile pictures right now. They're already doing it. It's
Yes.
like, what Fortnite skin do you have?
Yeah.
And if you don't have that Fortnite skin, you're considered a noob.
Yeah.
Right. This is my little brother. This is what he's 12-year-old, and
Yeah.
the next generation, their relevance to NFTs and blockchain is going to be they already understand the technology.
Yes.
And when I mean they understand the technology, they understand the power of digital identity and what it means if you own it. They know if they own a Fortnite skin, default character versus a Fortnite skin where you have to pay for it, you're considered better, cooler. And humans are social creatures. We thrive on social currency.
Yeah.
Like the
I
first
think
thing that you brought up was show me your shirt.
oh, I love
This
the
is
shirt,
this
man.
is this is a statement of like
Yeah.
of social currency. And it's the
Exactly.
Solana shirt, which is very much like this interview is going.
I'm sorry. You got cut off after like very much this interview is going, and then you went blank.
No, I said Solana very much like this interview is going down.
I think like it's a concept of digital scarcity, and when we talk about physical products integrating NFTs, it's just when you were talking about Apple, I just thought of this. Do you know how Apple has sometimes have these limited edition colors for its iPhones?
Yeah.
So what's one idea could be in the future, you could have these random set of NFTs that get dropped to like, people randomly who buy the new iPhone. And that's your idea of having like a special edition iPhone. And people could have separate perks in the maybe in the App Store and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that is one way to create digital scarcity instead of having to,
There's so many different ways to
yeah,
implement it, through physical goods, through digital goods, airdrops.
yeah,
There's so just any form of participation,
exactly.
any form can be
Wait,
digitalized.
yeah. Wait, I do want to ask you this though, because you came from a Web2 space and you transitioned into the Web3 space. Do you feel like there is some crossover between the two, or like is there anything that people who are trying to transition should know about?
Yeah, 100%. It's the same principles,
Right?
and the principles are through business, right? Like network as much as you can. Um, utilize the business principles of generating a business because that's what it is when you're building an NFT project. And if you're more so wanting to participate, I would recommend just getting and participating in these communities. So you don't have to build anything. And if you want to build something, perhaps it's better to get involved in these communities. An example of that is, let's look at the best rugby team in the world, the All Blacks. So they've got a female team, right? Now they've got an audience, a few thousand people, New Zealand diehard fans, right? They could release an NFT on their own, which is just not really ignore the space, just release something,
Yeah.
a few professional advisors, this and that. Or alternatively, they can participate in a community, which they've done. So they've bought 33 Water Women Galaxy NFTs, showing that, hey, we're a part of the Web3 space. We're going to be utilizing this in the World Cup for women in rugby, and they're going to slowly integrate. Therefore, they're able to participate when launching their brand, and that's what these big businesses are doing. Look at Nike and Artifact. Nike could have easily started their own thing, but they're like, oh, maybe we'll buy a project that already exists, and we'll let them drive the bus.
Yeah.
So not just push our creative vision in our direction, but let's let them drive. And that's how I think businesses are going to be acquired, when done well.
I think it's also like a after effect of the beer markets that we're in. because like some celebrities tried dropping their NFT projects and they tanked. So now the business thinking is more towards, okay, let's go and acquire instead of like trying to drop our own NFTs, because like some of these celebrities tried and they might have failed, which is a really good way to drive value, I suppose, to your brand and get into the space.
Yeah, when you don't educate your community either, it goes down. It's really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's consumers have become smarter. People in Web3 and degens are they're way more smarter than they were 6 months ago, 12 months ago.
I think not only that,
Yeah, jump
I
in.
think like I think just to be in this space, you have to have a certain like, certain level of being tech savvy and a
Mm.
certain way of thinking, which makes
I
you
think
different
that's
than the other
changing.
community.
I think that's changing.
Yeah.
Because we're onboarding the masses through Instagram and now Apple, the most
Yeah.
recent announcements.
Yeah.
People, you don't have to be tech savvy anymore. It's
Yeah.
more so that Web 2.5 approach that a lot of people are utilizing, which is
Yeah.
when you're able to buy NFTs with fiat, right? Like Apple Pay, uh, NFT purchasing
Yeah.
is the thing. How wild is that? You can buy an NFT with double clicking your phone.
That's extremely wild, man. Like that's one of the concepts that I'm trying to build with Shareching. That you could just buy NFTs with whatever crypto you hold. It's be it in your wallet, and I think that's going to help massively onboard new users in the space.
Yeah, and that's just about
Yeah. Yeah.
participating in
Yes.
and getting involved whilst
Yeah.
also remaining within the culture.
Yeah. I think that's what people want in this space. Like people want, if when the new entrants come in, they want the new entrants to understand the space, understand the ethos of the space, and the way we think. Just like the whole conversation about, I think, the centralized versus decentralized conferences, like what you're seeing with the conferences and how people react to these.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's going to play out, man. I don't know how decentralized the next wave will be. I don't think they'll care.
Oh well, that's like,
It's
yeah.
it might be hard to digest, but I don't know. I don't know if they'll care, just like how much they care about their privacy, right?
I
I mean,
see. Yeah.
we look at how much they give up, and I say they, and I say
Yeah.
we give up already of our privacy.
Yeah.
In order for things to be safe, secure, and more importantly, fast and convenient, we'll give anything up for these. If it's fast and convenient, we'll be like, oh yeah, whatever. Here's my Facebook login. Here's my all my data. We don't really care about that. However, the Web3 ethos is about owning that data,
Yeah.
owning all of that. And now, well, yeah, what's gonna shift? Will people's mindsets shift, or will they continue to go back to being fast, safe, secure, reliable, convenient? And I think it'll be a hybrid of both. I think
Yeah.
because there'll be so much supply, just like we're seeing now with like Rumble, Andrew Tate, the Sneaker, all these influencers
Yeah.
come up. Now it's not, is YouTube going to go down, and is Rumble going to exist? It's depending on the creator and the consumer. They now have a choice of which one to go to, and they can do both. It's never this way or that way. It's always consider you can do both.
Yeah, I think there's a slight bit of difference between this time and the time before. Like when we talk about Web 2.0 and Facebooks and Instagrams and all this launching, and a lot of people were not cognizant of the fact how their data is being taken and manipulated when they started. So remember when you started using Facebook or any of these social apps, how cognizant were you of the fact that they're listening to me all the time or they're collecting data right from
Yeah,
day
not a
one?
clue.
Right, and nobody knew that. And when these things started to unravel and people started to understand, now we're at a point where except for maybe blockchain, you don't have an option. So you can go from YouTube to Rumble, right? And there's a two different content types, but they're just segregated on the base of content type, not on the base of like which platform collects less data. And so that's the major shift here. Now when people look into Web 3.0, they want to be in charge of their own data. And I think you're right. It might exist somewhere in the middle, but the pendulum's going to swing more towards the decentralization. Although that being said, a lot of the blockchains that we talk about are also like really centralized and have really less number of nodes, and their Nakamoto coefficients are really low. So we'll see how this plays out. But I do think that the blockchain trilemma. It's like the
Yes,
scalability,
yes.
security, decentralization, right? So I think
Yeah.
we're in the space where like we are somehow giving up decentralization for scalability. But I think once we reach enough scalability, it's going to be like something's going to break, and then we're going to start moving more being focused more towards decentralization. So I think it's just the pendulum that's swinging. So it started from Bitcoin. That's like, oh, it's so super decentralized, but less number of transactions. How do we fix that? Now we're going to different layer ones, and then it's going to swing back, and we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. So that's what I think about the whole decentralized thing. So
Interesting
that's
take.
basically,
I like it.
yeah, that's basically what it is. I think it's time we should probably end the show now. Although I'm enjoying talking to you very much so.
Let's do it.
But
Let's end on the high.
yeah, well, man, it was lovely talking to you, Daniel. Thanks for taking out the time to do that, especially 8 in the morning. Yeah, and I love your
No,
Solana
pleasure,
shirt.
man. Pleasure, man. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
yeah,
I'm looking forward to you breaking through the 8 podcast barrier, which is
yeah.
if you survive 8 episodes,
Yeah.
then you've got a real podcast.
Well, fingers crossed, man. Let's see how this goes.
You'll make it happen.
All
You'll make
right,
it happen.
cool.
Best of
Thank
luck with
you.
it, man. Pleasure. Thanks for having me on. You're a
Thank you very
legend.
much. Thank you very much, man. Have a good day.
You too, brother.